Hey Jiu-Jitsu friends, Ryan Young, Kama Jiu-Jitsu again, and I'm still in Southern California. We're going into 4th of July weekend, and I'm over at the lake in Rancho Santa Margarita, and as you can see, everybody's kind of getting ready for their 4th of July show that's going on. All these blankets and stuff are laid out. Now, what I wanted to cover in today's video has to do with what just happened over at Professor Dave's place. And what we went over was our instructor training program. Now, not many schools have them. The way it used to be was when you were over at Gracie Torrance, or I think Helson had one, Hickson had one. And if you were going to be teaching jiu-jitsu, what he would actually do is he'd actually start teaching you how to teach, because knowing the curriculum and teaching it are two different things. And for the most part, with today's world, and with the proliferation of black belts now, and everybody wanting to open their own school, you have people that are opening their schools and not necessarily going through any training on how to teach. And one thing we do here at Kama Jiu-Jitsu that Dave Kama stresses is that we have a training program for our aspiring teachers. And what would make a candidate for that? Well, it could be somebody who is showing a desire to teach, or somebody who naturally would pull people aside and start helping them. Now, it would have to be somebody who is teaching somebody correctly. You don't want somebody who's teaching somebody the wrong stuff. So you want to make sure that, number one, you teach your students correctly. And if you're a student, you want to make sure you're diligent in learning things. And the second is you want to make sure that you have that teaching spirit, because you need to be, above all else, you need to be patient. And teachers in general are patient people, whereas most of us, I don't know if most of us are or aren't, but there's a good probability that the bulk of us, sorry, I'm just changing hands here, sorry to get so close to you, the bulk of us are not necessarily teachers. We think we'd want to be, and the funny thing is, there's really no need to teach. Everybody seems to think that the higher up they go in jiu-jitsu, they need to start teaching. And that's not true. I mean, just have fun. Train and learn, and you can help buddies out here and there if you want to, but you don't necessarily need to go through the exercise of teaching. But if you're going to go that route, make sure you have an ability or access to a teacher training program, because that is very important, because teaching is not the same as learning and then regurgitating. Because there are a lot of other things that a teacher must do and take into account before beginning to teach. First of all, one thing that you need to think about is that everybody learns differently. Now, granted, there are a few different ways to learn. Some people learn visually, some people learn with touch. We also call that kinesthetically, which means you actually move them and you push them, you make them feel things. And other people learn just by you simply talking to them and telling them, if you do this and do that and shift here, shift there, then they're good to go. Well, the problem is that we don't know, and a lot of people don't know how they learn. So what you need to do is you need to figure it out. And those are some of the things that we need to do. Also, the right attitude has to be in place if you're planning to teach. If you don't have the right attitude, you won't be a successful teacher. And you have to really want to teach. I know that there are many schools where the owner of the school, he at first has a desire to teach, or maybe not. Maybe he just has a desire to make money off of jiu-jitsu, because he's probably spent so much money on jiu-jitsu over the years. He's thinking, it must be a pretty lucrative thing to do. Running a jiu-jitsu school can be lucrative, but for the vast majority of them, it's not. It's an act of love. And you have to love teaching in order to be successful at it. And one thing I can say about Professor Dave, when he took over running the daily teaching duties over at Hickson Gracie Laguna Niguel back in 1993, he taught come hell or high water. If there was a rainstorm, if there was anything going on, he'd be there. If the club was open during holidays, he would be open. And I say the club, meaning the racket club that the academy was housed in. Whenever it was open, and if it coincided with the day he was teaching, he'd be open. Here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, not here, and being I'm in Southern California, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we even open on holidays. And I like to give our students all the opportunity that they can to train. And I I don't want it to be my fault that they don't get to train. So if I'm open on the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, and I'm teaching on those days, if they don't show up, that's up to them. But me as a teacher, I feel it's my obligation to provide the environment for them to learn. And it's very important to me. And what I try to do in our instructor training program is pass that on to our junior instructors. Now, we start them off as early as blue belt. Now, that doesn't mean they run their own classes or anything. What that means is that they're actively going through the motions of teaching with me supervising them and basically catching them if they fall. And it takes a certain type of person to be able to go into that environment knowing that here they are, they just learned the curriculum just a little while ago, and now I have to teach it. It takes a person who's a risk taker and a person who's not afraid of falling down and knowing they'll get right back up. And the thing is that I want to caution you is that now that you're teaching, or if you have that desire to teach, don't rush in and run your own academy right away. Because what happens is when you're running your own academy, in fact, there's a really good book. It's called The E-Myth, and I can't remember who wrote it. Some Michael something, and it was a good book in that it kind of gave us the example of the person who does something really well, working for someone else, and then decides, you know what, I can do it better. Let me do it on my own. Not realizing that once they go and do it on their own, they're not doing what they are good at so much of the time. They're now having to negotiate leases, having to deal with vendors, having to deal with customers. And what happens is they end up having somebody else do the actual job. So at Kama Jiu-Jitsu, for instance, I'm doing a lot of business stuff. I'm still teaching, but because of the fact that I also have to run the business and run the school, I don't get to teach as many class times as I would like to optimally. You know, if all was in a perfect world, I'd teach 12 to 15 classes a week, and that'd be awesome. But if I did that, then I wouldn't have time to make sure that all the bills are paid, make sure that all the training is done the way it needs to be done, and make sure that the curriculum is up to snuff, and make sure that I have time to come out to California to learn from Professor Dave. So today's training session was for instructors and also junior instructors, so I was part of it, as well as a couple of juniors that he has here in the Southern California area. And it's a different experience than going to class, because we cover different things, and it's something that more rounds out your knowledge base, but it does it in a way that enables you to pass the information on. So going back to cautioning you about opening your own school, you can open your own school, that's fine and dandy. You think to yourself, you know, now that I'm a blue belt or a purple belt or whatever, I want to run my own school. Why you want to do it, I don't know, but let's say you do that. Now you not only have to run your business, you have to teach, but when do you get to train? Right? If you're doing all those other stuff that are very important to making sure that your business stays afloat, when do you get to train and learn and better your knowledge? It's very difficult. You know, if you only have 10 hours a week that you can dedicate to jiu-jitsu, you know, jiu-jitsu activities, whether it be teaching or training, and you have yourself set up for 6 hours a week of teaching, then that leaves you only 4 hours a week to learn and to train and to better yourself on the mats and on the concepts. What happens is you end up getting limited because you can only go so far because your knowledge base only goes so far. So you're going to spend all that time teaching. And maybe you'll be able to get your students up to your level, maybe not, I'm not sure. But let's say you do, then because you haven't been allocating enough time to your learning, then you won't be able to pass on any more knowledge to them, and then you'll end up having to pass your student on to an instructor who can do that. In the meantime, what's the other option? The other option is you just train and you learn, and along the way you learn how to teach for a lot less amount of time than you are learning to train and learning to get better at the art, and you end up progressing faster. You're going to progress either way. You know, let's say you run your own school and you run it as a blue belt or a purple belt, you're going to progress. It's just going to take a longer time. And it really comes down to what you want. And the fact of the matter is that with so many schools out there, it's better to be running a school as a black belt than it is to be running it as a purple or a blue belt. And then even then, so you have black belts that are black belts in training but haven't really gone through any training program. So the quality of teaching although their skills are top-notch, their teaching ability is not quite developed yet. So now everybody seems to have them, but in the end, in the beginning, there was significance to it, and that is what we call the professor bars. So the professor bars really are the two white stripes that are on the top and the bottom of the red bar on a black belt. So the way our ranking system goes, when you're awarded a black belt, you're awarded a black belt with a white bar on it. And that white bar signifies that you're a black belt. It doesn't matter if you've taught a class or if you haven't taught a class. The fact that you've mastered the curriculum to that point that warrants a black belt, you get a black belt with a white bar. And if you decide at some point that you want to start teaching, then you'll enter your instructor training program, which is a 2-year program. After the first year, you'll get a new black belt, and that black belt will have, instead of the white bar, it'll have a red bar on it instead. Now that's the belt that you go to anywhere and buy a black belt. That's the belt that you're sold. Now, for traditional ranking, that is not a correct belt to sell somebody, because a lot of people, once they get their black belt, they automatically get that red bar. Well, at our school, to get the red bar, it's something that you would need to earn, and that's, like I said, typically 1 year in a training program. And when you hit your second year in a training program, then, successful completion of the program, then you get what are called the professor bars, which are the white stripes on the top and on the bottom of the red bar. And that's where you have gone through your professor training, and you are now, if anybody wants to refer to you other than your name, then that's where you're called a professor. And if you just have the red bar, that would be an assistant professor. So black belt, red bar, assistant professor, that is 1 year in a training program. Black belt with the red bar and the 2 white bars on top of it, on top and below, that would be your professor bars, and you'd be a professor. Now the degrees on top of that just comes with time, and depending on what association you're with or what your instructor does as far as their criteria, then for every so many years of active teaching, then you get a stripe, or we call them a degree, up to 6 degrees. So a black belt can have 6 degrees, and then the 7th degree is where you get a belt change, and that's where your Choral Belt comes in. And a Choral Belt is a red and black belt, and it's alternating red and black, and the reason why they call it choral is because it looks like a coral snake. And that's your 7th and 8th degree, and then once you become, and then your title will change from professor to master. So me being from the old school, I have a really hard time calling people master when they haven't earned the title of master. So one master that I have a lot of interaction with, is Master Fabio Santos, down in San Diego. And he was my professor when I was over at Gracie Torrance, but now that he is a 7th or 8th degree Choral Belt, he is now Master Fabio. And, Dave Kama, despite being a black belt for, well over 18 years now, he's still a 4th degree under Hickson, so he's still Professor Dave. And it's not any kind of disrespect or anything to call him professor. I mean, that's his title. But he's not Master Dave yet, and in due time he will be. But that's really up to Hickson himself. And Hickson obviously is Master Hickson. He's an 8th degree. And my first instructor, who is his older brother, is Grandmaster Halson Gracie, and that's where you get the 9th degree and another belt color change, and that's a red belt. So that's really how the whole belting system goes in Jiu-Jitsu, but it all starts with a teaching program. And if teaching is what you want to do, if that's something you enjoy doing, think about it long and hard, and talk about it with your professor, and make sure that your professor is training you on how to teach. Like I said, it's very different from training. Teaching you how to train and teaching you how to move and stuff is very different from you being able to teach somebody else how to move. So ask your professor if you have a training program, or if your academy has one, and if that's something that you want to do, look into it. Now, keep in mind that professor training or instructor training is a separate program in and of itself. At least with our school, it is. So that is something that we have a cost for, and it's not because we're trying to get more money out of our students or anything. It's because it's a different skill set that we're teaching. It's a lot of time involved. It's a lot of oversight involved, so it's just something that it just has to be. So if you have any questions on that, let us know. Professor Dave is one of the best teachers that I know, and that would be including Gracies themselves, and I've learned under several Gracies. So, and that's something that I really try to be. Now that I'm not competitive anymore. My goal is always to try to disseminate the information the best way I can, and for me, success lies in how successful the students I teach are, and that's really the measure of any school, is how successful you become after training at that particular school. So if you have any questions on our program, just email me, kamajujitsu@gmail.com. That's KAMA Jiu-Jitsu, JIU-JITSU @gmail.com, or hit me up on one of the Facebook pages, Kama Jiu-Jitsu, Kama Jiu-Jitsu Dallas Fort Worth, and BJJ Professor. In the meantime, have a happy 4th of July, or by the time this is up, hope you had a happy 4th of July, and keep yourself safe and injury free. Take care of your partners, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.